Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about a new division between Alpha Dungeon Masters and Beta Dungeon Masters that has been specifically introduced by Strixhaven. Strixhaven is boggling my mind. I think people don't have any idea how hard this comet hit Dungeons & Dragons. Really, Strixhaven is... it's just so many things. It is a dividing line in time when Dungeons and Dragons was one thing and now it is something dramatically better, more powerful, more deeper. Dungeons and Dragons will never be the same after Strixhaven. It is, 1974 we have Gary Gygax comes out and actually specifically, introduces Unbound Identity, Unbound Immersion. If you don't know what that is, check the link below. And and in 2021, Amanda Heyman came in and said, okay, combat era is finished, right? High complexity for social interaction begins now. This is the new realm, and it makes Alpha Dungeon Masters and Beta Dungeon Masters. And it's uncomfortable and it is frightening, and that's exactly why you saw the dramatic, frightened reviews of Strixhaven, not understanding it, fearing it, insisting it cannot be, introduced into other forms of Dungeons & Dragons. Every reviewer was right to be terrified by Strixhaven because it fundamentally tests every single 5th edition Dungeon Master. It doesn't test in any way D&D then Dungeon Masters or D&D not. They are left permanently behind. They don't even have the ability to grow into this new space, which is fine because half of them don't even understand that this new space is necessary or should exist, which is, so all Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition are now divided into Alpha and Beta. And let me explain why. All right, so, just hold on to your seats. Here we go. All right. 1974. Gary, introduces Unbound Identity, Unbound Immersion. These, in my humble opinion, they're these nested, hidden elements of Dungeons and Dragons that are not going to be understood for close to 50 years, right? And what he does is he said, and in my humble opinion, Gary essentially said, I get it. You're humans, right? You've been hitting each other with sticks for 2 millennia. You're not going to be able to, I can't take you to complexity for social interaction immediately. So for 47 years, you're going to focus on combat, right? And now that's a beta dungeon master today, a dungeon master who can run high complexity for combat. Now we have high complexity for social interaction, right? And you have no idea how deep the social interaction goes in Strixhaven. So you have new rules for friendship. You have new rules for beloved. Beloved is massively understood. I'd have to do a whole video on it, right? Here, I'll just give you a quick one, right? The people who say that beloved is here you go. Who's a beta dungeon master now? Strixhaven is a dating sim. Beta dungeon master does not understand just what was presented within Harry Potter, right? Harry and Ron and Hermione were beloved, right? They were way beyond friends, right? Beloved doesn't just mean romantic. It can mean a dedication and a willingness to sacrifice, right? Davy Chappie, beta DM, right? Said that Strixhaven is just a dating sim. Fundamentally doesn't understand social interaction. And this is the dividing line, okay? In order to be an alpha dungeon master now, you have to understand human social interaction. And guess what? Dungeons & Dragons came out of the 80s and the 90s, right? A lot of people now are good dungeon masters and can do that beta work, right? That high complexity on combat, but they literally cannot do the social interaction, right, part, because they don't know how to socially interact, right? Like, you can't emulate and simulate something that you don't fundamentally understand, right? And so basically, you have to be understanding how to interact with people who have less education, people who have more education, people who have less wealth, people that have more wealth, right? You have to understand how to manage up, how to manage down, right? You have to have deep, abiding social interaction knowledge in order to run post Strixhaven Dungeons and Dragons, right? And frankly, we have a ton of dungeon masters who struggle in social interaction and literally don't have the human social interaction experience to go into high complexity social interaction. One of the biggest clues you will find for these beta dungeon masters now is they say social interaction doesn't need high complexity. They're saying that because they literally can't handle it. They don't know all the depths of social interaction. You know, what's the different, how do spouses interact in ways different than someone who is a servant, right? How interactions with professional interactions in the game, right? Purchasing from a blacksmith, doing large logistics deals, right? Nobility interacting with non-nobility, right? Hierarchies. Look at the hierarchies in Strixhaven. It is astounding, right? So you have the founders, the dragons. Then you have the voice of the founders, okay? Then you have the archaics. Then you have the oracles. That's 4 levels of complexity. You haven't even reached the deans. Then you have deans, professors, instructors. Then you have the students who split into pledge mage, apprentice, and then you have the mascots, which are split into pet mascots and standard mascots. There's like 3 layers of tiered hierarchy within Strixhaven. All of these have unique social interactions that many dungeon masters, beta dungeon masters, don't even have the personal context to even understand, right? Now, let me explain alpha and beta dungeon masters, okay? So basically, beta dungeon masters are not stupid and they are not useless, right? They still have value, right? And so what you're going to do is basically, if you go through Utah, right, you will find light desert, okay? When you go there, you have to go over the mesas, right? You have to go across this light desert scrubland, right? These beta dungeon masters are ground guides, right? They can take you across the ground. They know where they're going, right? However, what happens when you want to ascend a tower in order to see an eagle's nest, and see inside an eagle's nest, right? Those ground guides are never going to be able to, they don't have the ropes, the pythons, the climbing gear to ascend, right? That's an alpha dungeon master, which Strixhaven demands, right? It is demanding people understand human social interaction at a level no book in Dungeons and Dragons has ever even hinted at, right? And it's just the start, right? And so you saw all these reviewers going, "Oh, I don't like this, man. This is silvery barbs. Oh my gosh, the fact that a social interaction could stop a legendary dragon from a claw attack. Oh my gosh, I'm so frightened. Oh no." And you just saw it constantly. You saw it all over. People were terrified of Strixhaven because they knew it was calling them to change as a person, right? Not learn more about silly information about medieval weapons and medieval war tactics, right? When you get better and get good enough to run Strixhaven, you will fundamentally change as a person, and legitimately D&D then and D&D not. And I would say a significant number of D&D now dungeon masters, they're like, please do not move me from beta to alpha. I do not want to ascend towers to look into eagle's nests. I want to stay on the ground because this is frightening to me. And that is the true response you're seeing from Strixhaven. It terrifies half to 75% of all dungeon masters are not ready for Strixhaven. They have no business running it because they don't know it. It would be like if I, didn't know the difference between a great sword and a long sword and was like, okay, I'm going to run Dungeons and Dragons for you. Your greatsword does D4 and your dagger does D12. Like, like you got to know what you're doing, right? And Strixhaven just, it divides the world into beta and alpha dungeon masters. Dungeon masters who have to stay on the ground because it's all they know, and alpha dungeon masters who can take you up to the towers to see the eagle's nests. That's high mechanical complexity for social interaction. And frankly, there are a ton of dungeon masters who have to change as people before they can even crack the cover on Strixhaven, right? Strixhaven is a comet that has hit the D&D Earth, world, and it's thrown up a whole bunch of silver and gold, right? And you can get there if you're willing to take the journey. But if your fear controls you, you can't make it. All that's my opinion. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.